All right, we're very happy to have with us today an exceptional electric and upright bassist, Lawrence Haber, based in the New Jersey area. Lawrence is a man to be seen on so many different stages and venues in New Jersey. He plays as a sideman, and he's also has a leader of his own collective, the Lawrence Haber Collective. So he's someone that you should definitely if you don't know about him, you will know about him now. Absolutely. So, Lawrence, thank you so much for coming today to speak with me.
Thank you for this opportunity. This is very exciting, and I think the world of you, man, and what you do. So, not to start off the Mutual Admiration Society meeting, but I appreciate that you're doing this, which I love. I love podcasts, especially music podcasts.
Yeah, I
And
just want to dive into your your creative process.
sure,
And I thought, actually, what you play with so many different artists as a sideman, and you're also your own leader. But obviously, people see something in you as a bassist. The bass is such an important role in every genre, every band. What do you think it is about your playing, your approach, that you get? People call you and say, I'm definitely hiring Lawrence for this gig. What do you think you bring to the table that makes you stand out as a bass player?
yeah, so it's always like the $10 million question for me because of the amount of gigs I do. Is how do you get all these gigs, man? And it's a loaded question, so I kind of bucket it when I think about it. I think about it often. I kind of put it in buckets, and the first and the most obvious is just on the professional side, having a good reputation, which is there's a whole social part of that for sure that a lot of people are unfamiliar with. Just being cool, bringing good energy, being supportive. Sometimes putting your own ego aside and even your own ideas aside, even if you know in your heart that they're good ideas, you really believe in them. Sometimes to do a job, because it is a job, when you're a sideman in particular, you have to put that to the side, and people appreciate that whether they realize you did it or not. They especially the leaders, they feel that they get their vision is honored and their vision is service. But then there's the real work, and I can use an example. Just this weekend, I did an original show with two different singer-songwriters and their bands, and it was about 30 tunes that I had to learn and chart out and internalize and be comfortable with, so that they would be comfortable. And by putting in what probably amounted to 10 to 12 hours of time transcribing for this gig, led to a very nice message. Not to pat myself on the back, from one of the band leaders, just saying, I appreciate the work that you do, the job that you do, and that you always do that. And thankfully, that person paid that compliment in a public forum. As people see that, and from a business standpoint, because I am a small business owner doing this, that word gets around like, oh, he must know what he's doing because so and so said he did, and I can see it represented in the videos that people posted. So it's like a Yelp review or something for my bass playing.
Yeah, so you put in all the time, like you said, like you made an effort to bring the music to the level that it deserves to be, to brought to. But and there's a lot of work that comes in, but we obviously love what we do, and we wouldn't do it unless we absolutely loved it. When you're in a situation like that, like having to put in all of this work, when you're in the moment playing, do you still feel the same joy as if you were doing your own gig as a band leader, or does it feel like a job when it's like that, or are you still just like, I love what I do, this is it?
Well, there's two levels. I still want to be like my heroes that I read about. I used to read Bass Player magazine from cover to cover, since I was a kid. And I always wanted, when I would read these articles about like the superheroes of electric and double bass, Ron Carter, Will Lee Sklar, I was like, well, okay, what they're saying, I guess I have to do if I want to be like these guys. And so they would invest themselves into the music and take it incredibly seriously and fake it till you make it. You may not like the tune, but when you get up there, if you really know it, you might just identify with the fact that you're the bass player and that you were chosen to do this thing. And that alone is a great joy. I mean, man, if I could go back to being a kid, a 15, 16-year-old kid, to have dreamt of these opportunities just to play any gig at all, and then to be able to do it on someone's original gig, that alone is inspiring. But for me, when I internalize material, I start to connect with it and I start to own it a little bit, even if it's a cover band. You know, it's like, oh, cool, I know the bass part of this, I know the tone that's necessary, I know the parts, I know the feel, I understand what the lyrics are about, even on a real kind of corny song, and you get into that, and then all of a sudden, you know, the short answer is yes. I almost look. There's nights where I don't want to be there, you know, or I'm tired, and it's a paycheck, but I still take a breath and say, okay, I am very grateful that I'm here doing this as opposed to not doing it, because so many people, especially these days, if you go down this whole other sidetrack. One of the things one of my good friends told me, was also a great teacher and player, Evan Marion, who's I think the world of. You know, he said what makes me different is I'm not just one of the guys on Instagram or TikTok playing bass. I love so many of those guys and girls. There's so inspiring to me. I learned so much from them. But he said what makes me unique in my little neck of the woods, I'm out there. Those guys would hypothetically rather do this than what they're doing. They'd rather leave the basement, leave the laptop behind, and stop doing content and actually get called to play, you know? So I when he said that to me, it really clicked, like, wow, that's my unique journey that I have that others may not have. Certainly the bulk of people doing what I do don't get to do as near as much as I've been blessed to do. So
Yeah, it's a difference. I mean, being out and about in the real world, playing for people and having that human connection there's nothing that, you know, really can replicate it. And, you know, you mentioned Evan, who, you know, was your instructor, and I'm sure he's, you know, instilled a lot of valuable lessons for you. And, you know, in this world that we live in, we connect with so many musicians, you know, some who are older than us, some who have more experience. And I'm just curious, what's the most unusual piece of advice that you ever received that actually turned out to be useful?
there's so many. Verdine White from Earth, Wind and Fire. This is probably the lamest answer, but it just came to mind, so I'm going to spout it out. He always said, play great basses, gear. He was like, don't get things that inspire you. Like there's no value. You can't put a price tag on having something that you pick up, you know, your tool, and you go, yeah, let's go to battle with this today. And I remember he's a stupid quote. He's like, play great basses. Like don't like shortchange your instruments. Like there's this cliche, like, oh, I can make myself good sound on anything. To me, that's not true. I need the right things to play, or I struggle. You know, if I'm playing a 3-hour show, I don't want to struggle to get a tone. I want to get to my sound really quickly. So that was, I guess, something that maybe wasn't expected that came to my mind right away. And I started
it's great.
Really,
it's great.
really honoring that recently by I'll bring I used to bring one bass cabinet, because these days it's like the smaller cabinets is the thing, they're lightweight. But playing with all these bands and all these loud venues, bars, weddings, bar mitzvahs, whatever it is, I need clean headroom to get a tone. Like I don't know how loud the drummer is going to be, so like I'm gonna shortchange myself and the sound of the band, the sound of my bass, by just not bringing one extra piece of equipment that's going to make all the difference in the world. So it's that is like the equipment version of putting in those extra 5 or 6 hours to learn the tunes. Like I want everything to be right, my sound, my knowledge of the material, and that'll just make it better for me, for them, for everybody, and I'll get called back.
Yeah, that there's so many, you know, on the equipment, and there's so much that goes into it that you know, the audience doesn't realize these little things you're talking about. Now you play so much, and you know, you mentioned that there are those moments where you're like, oh, this is kind of a paycheck, which I understand completely. Do you have any pre-performance, you know, rituals or things that you do, or are you superstitious about anything? Because I know me, I like to, when I play like a gig, I really like to stretch the tips of my fingers like this for 30 seconds each. So I'm just curious if you have any pre-performance things you might do.
It starts when I wake up. I've been on this kick the last month and a half or so. One of these like Instagram memes, some doctors like drink 3 liters of water a day, 3 eggs a day, do cardio. So I'm trying to like not have as much, you know, take in alcohol as much. I'm not a big drinker, but I'm limiting that. A health kind of thing, 8 hours of sleep, because I just want to physically be and hydrated and physically be in the best possible shape to deliver a good performance. But with that comes the practicing, the shedding. I have to play for myself every day, which means I have a whole regimen of warm-ups I do, maintenance practice, scales, arpeggios, playing over standards, trying to just get better at learning tunes, improvising on tunes. Transcription is a huge thing for me. Reading, getting my sight reading together. There's about a 30-minute to an hour window that I like to have in my day, no matter whether there's a gig or a family thing or a busy day, no matter what, that has to happen for Lawrence, so that when I get to the gig, I already did for myself. And that actually came from Gerald Veasley, who's a fantastic bass player I also studied with out in the Philly area, and he had this thing, about getting
Gerald
up.
Veasley, you said, right? Gerald Veasley.
Gerald Beasley? I think
Yeah.
Gerald Beasley. Yeah, there's also a Beasley, a Walter Beasley. There's a couple of similar
Right.
names out there.
Yeah, he teaches
Anyway,
at University of the Arts, I think, if I'm not
I think he
mistaken.
does or did, and but I studied. I had the long story short, a privilege to study with him privately on and off for a year or so. And one of the things he said was he gets up before the whole family every day, before the kids are up or whatever, and his wife, and just gets right to the base, like before breakfast, before going outside. I gotta get to the dogs first, but once the dogs are taken care of, I try to sneak away into the studio and just start getting the instrument under my hands, my fingertips, and then hopefully getting in at the bare minimum, a basic shed of a concept and some maintenance stuff, just to get the blood flowing. So
Yeah, I mean, everyone has their own. Some people don't want to play. Some people play for hours and hours before the gig. This is great, and you play in so many venues, and I wanted to ask also, because you've been in a variety of situations. Do you think there's a famous venue or place that maybe you play or have checked out that has an undeserved reputation, either good or bad? I'm curious about maybe a
good,
certain
bad,
place.
or wow, I've never thought of that before. Honestly, there are a lot of bars I play down the shore. I'll give you a great example. Martel's Tiki Bar, which is
On
in
Point Pleasant.
I'm very lucky to play there quite often, have been on and off for the better part of 20 years. And it's a big stage. They just recently have a new sound system, new PA. They cleaned up the stage. It's right on the water. It sounds great all the time. The sound guys go out of their way to allow that. You get a nice long time. There's lights. I mean, to be able to do that on a beautiful day in the spring or summer or early fall for an audience, I mean, like, what's better than that to me? I mean, is it famous? Is it Madison Square Garden? No, but to me, like, I know people in my community who say to me things like, "Man, I would love to play Martell's one day," and then I forget, like, "Oh my God, it's a landmark in this region. If you come from out of state, you may think, oh, it's Point Pleasant, New Jersey. That's like a famous part of New Jersey, and that's a stage that, much like Jenkinson's Pavilion, people who are musicians would like to play."
No, it's that, what, because I was a kid and I used to go to the Point Pleasant with my family. And even
Yeah,
then, like when I was like really young, I used to see how the pier went out into the water. I'm like, wow, that's so cool. But
yeah.
yeah, I wasn't, I
I find
never been
myself
there.
staring.
Yeah.
But I've had the luck of playing Bitter End in New York, and you're on that stage, and you're just like, oh my God, like last night, Will Lee was here, Osmoy was here, and then you just go through the people that have played there both recently and throughout history. And you're like, I can't believe, whatever Brecker was here, or singer songwriter, like so many legends. And then I played the Stone Pony, which was incredibly loud, but this is here. That's essentially the Madison Square Garden of the Jersey Shore. To me, it was just a place a couple of towns over that had live music. I played the Saint, which was an original venue in Asbury for a long time, and that was always just like a place to aspire to. So I could go on, but the places I'm lucky to play in sort of a standard rotation, I don't take those for granted. Plus, they're allowing me the opportunity to play a consistent schedule of gigs. They're basically, okay, here's 20 times this year, every year, you're going to get to play music for people. I don't take that and you're paid for it well. So I don't take that for granted.
Yeah, because I also wanted to ask you this because, we all know that, clubs or venues open and close. And it's almost like sometimes I feel like there's almost like this level of anxiety and that, like, nothing is permanent sort of thing. Is
Oh
this
yeah. Oh,
so you think about this from time to
I
time?
think about it to the point. I mean, I have a little anxiety and OCD as it is. So I always, I wonder about what happens if, place closes. So what I found, to give a little advice, is variety. I book things myself when I'm not with the working bands I'm with. I always try to be in at least one really good working band situation. I found myself in a band or two recently that I'm very, very happy to be a part of, and they're doing things the way that I like, both from a music and business standpoint. But then I also always remember that, it can end tomorrow, and I could be injured or otherwise sidelined. A band leader, every band ends. I always say the Beatles broke up. It's very hard to make it work. So I try not to assign my identity too much to being a gigging musician, because so much is not within the realm of my control. But it is something I value greatly. So what I try to do to keep that going is to just keep myself out there consistently, do a good job when jobs come about, and also have a little bit of my own, like this Lawrence Haber Collective thing, have a little bit of an eye towards when I'm not, in another working situation, another environment, again, we're just talking about gigs here. There's also many other things like writing and recording and jamming, so to speak, getting together with people. The networking, I guess that's really the topic I'm talking about, is the networking thing I found to be invaluable, having a lot of irons in the fire and a lot of relationships.
Well, that's great. I mean, it's definitely, it helps. I'm sure that's a great thing for people to, your approach to thing. I mean, because it is something like, we this isn't a 9 to 5, and we do need to hear these things about, how do we truly think about that, impermanence, so to speak. So that's great.
Yeah, and you have to remember, it is an artistic path. So that might not be for everybody. Some people just want to do what they do their way, and that's beautiful and wonderful, and some of the greatest artistic accomplishments in history are from that spirit. But if we're just talking about being a sideman, I do think sometimes the music business education artifice, system that's out there, especially at a higher academical, doesn't always tell a lot of players like, hey, if you want to get gigs, you're gonna, like, where do you live? I live in this city. Okay, there aren't a lot of gigs in that city. So what kind of music do you want to play? Jazz. I want to be a sideman on electric bass. I want to be no, you kind of have to identify what it is you want to do, and that might be being in your room and just making music, and that works. Like Billie Eilish became a megastar doing that.
Yeah. I also wanted to ask you too, because you talk about these you work with so many people, and this is also something I'm kind of curious about. We've all had these people who come into our lives that maybe we look up to them or whatnot, and they might give us a piece of advice. Now, is there a specific piece of advice someone's given you that you've chosen to like completely ignore or make your own, but it actually worked out for the better? You don't have to name the person or anything.
Sure,
I'm just kind of curious.
I'm actually going to name somebody who I just wrote today, who I admire greatly, and a relationship I've had with him, and he's a cool guy, and I think he wouldn't mind me. I'm not calling him out, but I think it's worth. He deserves to be recognized. His name is Richie Monica, and he's a drummer. He's more than just a drummer. He's a musician, and he's played with some heavyweight people, but that's not what's important. I was very lucky to end up in a cover band with him when I was super young and super green. Talented, but green, and he had already been on the road with a bunch of bands and played some heavy, high-level music in a variety of circumstances. And I had this relationship in my head with him that was like mentor, but then I wasn't sure if I was being kind of musically hazed or something. But so many of his words have proven to be true, about just the craft and what's about time and sound and having a great tone and great time feel, and so many things seem contradictory. I would be confused by a bit of advice, but then the opposite thing would come, and it's all valuable. The point is, you have to have an open mind, and then it has to go through the filter of your own experiences for you to really understand. So it was almost like a Buddha. I mean, he goof on me even for bringing it up, but he's always been sort of in the back of my mind. I reconnected with him and did a couple of gigs with him last year, but he's always kind of there, in the back of my brain, a lot of the things that he instilled in me. And he's a drummer, so of course, a great drummer, so I value his opinion very much so. And he's only played with the best bass players, so to me, I listen to that guy because he's obviously doing something right. And if I want to be in those circles, I need to pay attention to what he has said.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask you too, because you know, I want to, I like, this might be kind of an obscure thing, is that
Sure.
let's, if a psychologist were to watch you play, or just or listen to your music just the bass through headphones or something, what do you think they would say about you, personally, maybe about your personality, or like, what do you think they would hear?
That his musicianship is his piece and the one place where his frenetic personality can rest and get lost. I had somebody say something nice about my playing over the weekend, and it was very different from what I thought I sounded like. I mean, it'd be weird to like share a compliment. I feel it's a little narcissistic, but it's probably worth it for the purposes of our conversation. Which is, it said we were playing an acoustic combo, percussion, and then I was playing electric bass, singer songwriter thing, guitar, no drums. So my bass was very prominent, both rhythmically and sonically. And this really great singer songwriter came up to me. I've known him; he's heard me play many times. He said, I could really hear you today." And he's like, "You approach the bass like a cellist." He said, when you play, when you were filling in the spaces, which I guess means like the fills. He said you were very sensitive in the way that you added or did not add to the music. It was melodic and rhythmic and had a warm sound. So I wrote that all down because I take a lot of notes about things, especially music content. And I already forgot what your question was, but yeah,
It's okay. This is great. This is great. I
he,
mean,
but
those are
I never
cool.
thought about it. And then the psychology thing. It's a wow. So you like, did I sound relaxed? He was like incredibly like relaxed and in control. And I was like, wow. I'm usually like the uppity guy, the over caffeinated guy, like right now. Seven.
Yeah, because I think like if a psychologist, if they, maybe just heard they might go like structure, you know what I mean? Like there's like he's like a type whatever a personality, he has to have, there's like a certain
Yeah.
structure behind it. But
Okay.
it's, I mean, like it is kind of a loaded question. And I also
Yeah.
talking about, when he heard you play and he said that you sounded like a cellist. Now, I mean, what's the biggest risk you've ever taken in a performance, you think?
Well, obviously, I slapped a million notes on people's songs when I first learned how to do that as a kid. So those were all risks that could have derailed me. Um,
Would you call
man,
them would you
I'll
call
tell you.
them, would they be mistakes, or are they like just risks, you think?
I think well, then those were mistakes. I did not know better. But I say the risk would be showing up to any performance not 100% confidence in the material. I mean, that's a professional risk. But there are times I know I can dog it a little bit. I can hear basic chord changes and follow a drummer and follow cues. But it's a risk when even if you're playing with novices, they don't care your level is. They just want to be comfortable that the material that you're there, especially if there's people in the audience, right? So
Definitely.
showing up unprepared. But as far as the playing itself and the music itself, which is actually a little bit more of interest anyway than the career stuff, I think. Um, it would be just trying to impart my whatever I'm studying in a context where it may not work. Yeah, like a great example would be I've been into this whole idea of lyrics, like having meaning to my choices. If I'm playing, fills, like they shouldn't be every 8 bars or 4 bars I play a bass fill, like a lot of drummers will do, you know. It should be a context to the tune. If there's this, song about whatever it's about, love or whatever, like
You're
nothing.
almost thinking like a drummer sometimes when you're doing those fills, like the same way a drummer would.
Yeah,
That
it's almost like a weird reflex. I have to do something here. I can't just play a groove. And I'm not saying that's altogether bad, but generally speaking, it's not good practice. You wouldn't do that on a record. You wouldn't just play a fill every 4 bars on a record if you wanted to get called back. So that would be a concept where I've been exploring that more recently. So I might play something that almost sounds out of context or comical, but it relates to a lyrical thing. And I've noticed people will like smile or something, almost as if they recognize it without realizing what they recognized. Like, I sang that thing and you just played it. You played something relative to the idea or the
no,
lyric.
it's beautiful. I think, you know, that's actually, I'm like, oh wow, like that he actually thinks that it would be almost like the way a drummer would do a fill. but this is great. I mean, this podcast is just getting started and everything. So we're definitely gonna we have to do it again.
Yeah,
100%.
I
But
hope so.
yeah, no, this
Anytime.
I think that definitely people who want to have a career playing the bass will definitely gain a lot from this, because you work, you're fantastic, and
Thank you.
just thank you so much for doing it. We'll say a proper goodbye when I hit the record with the the turn off button. But Lawrence,
Yeah,
thank you so much for doing this for
thank
us.
you. I really appreciate it, and shout out to you, and to everyone that hires me and all the various brands that I work with. So
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you.